Hi, everyone. I'm excited to present our paper titled Language Models Can Learn Rare Phenomena from Less Rare Phenomena, the Case of the Missing AANNs. Modern language models seem to generate grammatically correct, well-formed sentences. And so whether they're doing this by meaningfully learning grammar is of major interest in cognitive science and linguistics. But if all they're doing is memorizing from their massive training data, though, that wouldn't be very exciting. So as a case study, we investigate how language models come to learn a strange and interesting linguistic pattern, the rare AANN construction, or the article, adjective, numeral, noun. For instance, a beautiful 5 days in Miami. And so getting this construction right requires going against some of the most obvious generalizations a model might make. So a model that has been trained on English might memorize that A goes before a singular noun phrase, and that numerals tend to precede adjectives. The AANN, while it's both these rules. And so do language models simply memorize the seen AANNs verbatim, or are they able to generalize to novel instances? And if they are, then how might these generalizations emerge? To study these questions, we rely on a paradigm which we call controlled rearing. Here, we first measure the behavior of a language model that is pre-trained on a small tractable corpus, and then we compare it to the behavior of the same language model architecture trained on the same corpus, except that this one has been systematically manipulated, informed by some hypothesis. In our experiments, we use the BabyLM 1.0 as our pre-training corpus, which contains 100 million tokens. Next, by using sophisticated regex patterns, we verify, which has been verified using a lot of recall analysis, we detected about 2,400 ANN containing utterances, which accounts for about 0.02% of the entire corpus, which makes this quite a rare construction. For our language models, we use the OPT autoregressive transformer, and we restrict it to about 100 million parameters. So for our tests, we use Mahowald 2023's suite to evaluate language models' understanding of the AANN. And from these, we use the 3,400 sentences that contain AANNs and are associated with human judgments of acceptability from 1 to 10, 10 being most acceptable. And so out of these, we select cases that are rated above 7 as our threshold of well-formed AANNs, and we filter this to only have ones that do not occur in BabyLM, which leaves us to about 2,000 instances. And so for each well-formed ANN in this data set, it also contains 4 different corrupted variants. For instance, those where the order between the adjective and numeral is swapped, or ones which do not contain an article, or ones that do not contain a modifier or a numeral. For our quantitative tests, we use the syntactic log-odds ratio from the language models, where we compute the logarithm of the ratio between the language model probability of the construction, given the prefix, and the probability of the construction from the unigram model, trained on the training data set of the model. And we normalize this with the length of the construction. And so accounting for this unigram probability is important because we will be performing ablations in the language model's training data, which might create imbalanced in the amount of unigram tokens. To compute accuracies, we calculate the proportion of times the slur of the well-formed ANN instance is greater than all 4 of the corrupted variants. And so because this is a selection of 1 out of 5 possible surface forms, chance performance in this case is 20%. And so our first experiment asks how well BabyLM trained language models learn about the ANN. So we start off by comparing the accuracy of a language model trained on BabyLM to that trained on the same corpus, but with every single detected ANN utterance removed. And so this plot will show this comparison. The x-axis denotes the training condition of the language model, and the y-axis shows the accuracy. For comparisons, we show performance of more capable language models like Llama and GPT-2. We see that language models trained on the unablated BabyLM generalize quite well to the unseen ANN instances. And surprisingly, language models that have not seen any ANNs show a slight drop in performance, but interestingly, this is still above chance. This even translates to lexical constraints. For instance, Humans preferred AANNs with quantitative adjectives over qualitative ones, and largely preferred stubbornly distributive adjectives like large. For instance, they do not like a large 5 pianists. Our language models also reflect this trend, regardless of whether or not they have seen AANNs. To drive the point home, we also consider a language model that is trained on a counterfactual version of the construction, where we replace every AANN containing instance with an instance that has a corrupted word order. For instance, we replace AANNs, or a beautiful 5 days, with 5 beautiful A days, which we call as noun, or the numeral adjective article noun. So apart from noun, we also consider ANAN, where we only swap the order between the adjectives and numerals. And so for all these counterfactual variants, we come up with analogous tests with similar corruptions. And so these plots will show our accuracies on these 3 tests. Unsurprisingly, language models that have not seen the counterfactual variants have 0% accuracy on them. When language models do see the counterfactuals, though, they perform above chance. However, they interestingly also show above chance performance on AANNs, even though AANNs are not only absent in their experience, but are replaced with counterfactuals. So the interim takeaways from this experiment are that language models learn about the AANN, even without encountering a single instance, more strongly than they learn its counterfactual variants, and in a way that extends to lexical semantic constraints. And so this suggests that the language models might be relying on indirect evidence in their training data, which might contribute to their learning of the AANN. So the natural question to ask in this context is, what is the key to learning this construction? So to do this, we not only ablate AANNs, but we also ablate utterances that conform to our hypotheses about what might affect the learning of AANNs. So we consider multiple different hypotheses. First, we look at any case where a determiner precedes an adjective, numeral noun sequence. Here, a language model might simply generalize to a beautiful 5 days by observing that the beautiful 5 days is acceptable. Our other hypotheses are more linguistically related to the construction. For instance, other cases where noun phrases with plural nouns are treated as singular, like a few days, where the article a is linked with a few days, or $5 is plenty, where $5, which is a plural noun phrase, is being used with the singular verb is. We additionally consider another manipulation where we remove cases such as the adjectives and the numerals, such that the adjectives and numerals are equally likely to fall an indefinite article. And to ensure that the language model's behavior is not simply explained by loss in data due to our ablations, we also randomly removed utterances that do not conform to any hypothesis. Importantly, all these phenomena are far more frequent than in BabyLM than our AANNs. So here are our results. The x-axis shows the average slur values for our language models trained on our various ablated corpora. We measure these values for 2 cases, one where AANNs are removed from the training along with our hypotheses, and other where they're kept in. And so lower slur values will suggest that absence of these specific hypotheses adversely affects the model's generalization on AANNs. So we see that language models are largely indifferent to the absence of any determiner followed by AANNs. They show almost the same slurs. But these models seem to show non-trivial effects in the absence of cases where measure noun phrases are treated singular, and with our more ruthless ablation of removing all cases such that adjectives are equally likely to follow an article, indefinite article. And importantly, randomly ablating the corpus does not seem to affect the language models as much as these linguistically related cases. And so finally, these patterns are largely absent in 4-gram trained LMs that are trained analogously, suggesting that this cannot be simply explained by shallow n-gram processing. So overall, we see that language models can demonstrate a completely novel linguistic phenomenon by relying on other related or more frequent phenomena. And that this finding cannot be explained simply by data loss or more simpler shallow n-gram patterns. We do have a third experiment in the paper where we analyze what properties of the seen AANNs affect language model generalizations, which I encouraged everyone to check out. And so overall, this work leaves us optimistic that controlled rearing of language models could be a fruitful method for understanding linguistic generalizations in learners. Thank you.